So for that purpose, we will be using a lot of frameworks. So I thought we would spend a minute trying to understand clearly what we mean by framework. So this take what follows as a framework on frameworks. Um, we talk about conceptual frameworks or theoretical frameworks, and we very often use those words interchangeably. They're not exactly the same, and it's a good idea just to have a clear understanding of the terms. So, first of all, this little weight framework. I mean, framework is simply an abstract, logical, I would emphasize logical, structure of meaning, right? It's a structure, that's what a framework is. It's a structure of meaning. And it comprises concepts and the relationships among the concepts. And again, concepts are very simply an intellectual representation of an aspect of reality, right? That's what a concept is. It's a way in which we represent. So again, it's a form in which we try to apprehend reality. Now, it's not the same thing, a theoretical and a conceptual framework is not the same thing. A conceptual framework, we put these two together. It consists of specific concepts, and very importantly, their interrelationships. And we will use a lot of this, and you will see that this question of interrelationships is very important. And the logicality, the logical character of a framework depends on how good we are at understanding how concepts connect with each other. A theoretical framework takes this one step further because it then tries to explain some of the concepts on the basis of other. And that's to me, and again, other people might have different understandings. But the key difference between a conceptual and a theoretical framework is that a theoretical framework attempts to explain the relationships on those phenomena by, for example, by making cause and effect assumptions, saying concept A or phenomenon A, which we capture with a concept, causes a concept B. And again, you'll see a lot of that, certainly during your review of epidemiology. That's probably the key question in epidemiology. But a lot of what happens in the biological and social sciences is about establishing causal connections. And that's the big difference between a conceptual and a theoretical framework. Here in this course, we're going to be mostly operating at this level. We're not going to be generating hypotheses and reviewing what the test of that hypothesis tells about causal relationships. We're going to mostly be trying to see how, in this complex multidimensional reality that we call public health, how those concepts relate to each other. And then finally, another word we'll use a lot is this word model. And model is simply a symbolic representation of a concept. There are many types of model. We have mathematical models. It's a symbolic representation. It uses symbols called numbers and operators. Or we will use schematic models. And again, in these courses, we won't use a lot of mathematical models, although you will have many of these in some of the courses. We will use some schematic models. So, in sum, what we are trying to do, what we'll try to do in this course, is to develop a rigorous and systematic way of thinking as a guide to action, aided by frameworks, logical structures among concepts, understanding their interrelationships, and very often using models as a way of simplifying what is the reality. The important thing is never, ever to think that reality is fully captured, because even the most complex model or framework fails to capture the entire multidimensionality of reality. So it is not a substitute. That's the fundamental premise for action and for immersion into reality. It is a way of helping us handle that complexity in a way that we can manage and hopefully that we can then transform, because we're there to be agents of change. And thinking clearly about that which we want to change, that requires clarity of thinking around some of these concepts. We always simplify when we develop a framework or a model. Reality is strictly much more interconnected and multidimensional. And all of these are human constructions where we try to approach reality in a systematic, rigorous way. But we don't fully capture that in all its complexity. And this is why the purpose of this course is very instrumental. These are instruments to help you understand reality, okay? But we need to realize that the reality is intrinsically much more complex. Now, if we think clearly about that, we are empowered to act on that and to transform it. But we will always be simplifying. There's always a simplification every time we construct a conceptual framework or a conceptual model, always. It's important because sometimes we think that we make a model, a schematic model, that captures everything, and I'm sure you all realize that that's never the case. That in actuality things are much more complex. But this is a much better way than approaching reality with a blank slate. Now we can sometimes quantify the uncertainty, right? And that's something we do when we formalize uncertainty is basically, or error terms are a way of recognizing that reality has many more dimensions than what we can capture. We're going to use mostly schematic models, and some of them, I would say that I would use a very pragmatic approach. We use them if they're helpful to approach reality. There's sometimes there's an aesthetic quality to some of these models. They're elegant, right? That when we say this is a very elegant model, it's an elegant way of thinking about reality. But the ultimate test, it's not its elegance, it's its usefulness. And that's why, that idea that quote about ideas and action being together. Is it useful for action, for purposeful, enlightened action, or not? That would be my criterion, rather than the intrinsic elegance or the strict, the strict logical character of any particular model.